Okay, so let's, we'll call the meeting to order. The June meeting of the Augur Carve. We have a very kind of very light, sort of a light agenda. We have no projects to review this month, either for an advisory review or for a COA review. But what I'd like to do tonight is basically continue lines of conversation that we've begun earlier. The first of them being a discussion, basically it's a follow-up on a phone call that Kevin and Graham had with Maggie Dobbs, talking about programs in the future, the public outreach side of the work that we do, and then to continue the discussion that you guys were working on last month, and welcoming Kathleen Applenav to tell us sort of how sausage was made, the gestation of the ordinance that we're all working on here. So anyway, sorry. So call the meeting to order and review. The first thing we have to do is to review and pass the May 12th hard meeting minutes that Kevin put together, and then helped me a lot to know what you guys talked about. So anyway, we have a motion to approve those meetings.
So moved.
Jim moves and second. Graham has a second. All right, all in favor? Okay, great. I mean, the minutes are approved. Okay, so before we get into the discussion of the ordinance and contributing buildings and how the list of contributing structures might be to be amended, let's talk about the nice conversation we had with Maggie, Kevin, and you guys, and Graham. You guys want to sort of talk about that a little bit, and we can sort of carry that a little bit further. I'm glad we have you here because I want to talk with you about some of that outreach, because we've done outreach with the Conservancy in the past, and we need to try to see if we can, for the upcoming year, try to foster more and more of that too. So we threw some ideas out on the phone call, but if you guys want to sort of follow it up, this was really more the initiative that you guys were working on.
Yeah, so we met on Zoom. We first learned that they are excitedly preparing a new website, which will include a new commission page. I don't know if we will have that much input when it actually is published, but we will be able to contribute once it's up and running, and that could include access to documents stored as PDFs. So I'm forgetting some of the particulars about this, but we can think ahead of how property applicants, property owners might actually engage with the website more comprehensively than they currently do. So this is a to be continued process, but we should have that on a horizon. And I think it's pretty standardized. I don't know what's powering the website, like WordPress, but all of the pages are relatively similar. So we don't have customized options here, but my sense it's going to have what is already there, a slightly clearer, and we will be updated when it's ready for review.
And they're going to be interested in also additional content. And so I'm kind of, we have potentially content that's quite photogenic, or they're going to look for things to put on the front page and change it. So I think any sort of program or things like that, we might be able to really help publicize it through that. So it's going to look, I think, quite a bit different than the current website. It's going to be, I think, visually much more interesting. We saw just a mock-up on the call. They haven't released it, but we would see sort of like an in-progress mock-up. It's going to be a lot more sort of picture-driven and more like a more modern website than we were used to using. So
yeah, that was all good.
My take on it was that will get, like every other board and commission, will get its own page.
Right.
And they were actually looking for some feedback from us on a very short timeline, which came and went. I didn't even know, but apparently it's been in the works for some time. So we've been asked to provide any information we can on what we'd like to see out of the new website and its functionality and capabilities. And a couple of quick back and forths, we talked about documents, as Kevin mentioned, photographs, as Dennis mentioned, and a calendar. So that can be for upcoming events, whether it can be actually on the page, but it will also feed into the master calendar. So somebody doesn't navigate to our page, they might see our event that filters through to master calendar. So all those things sounded very good. And we went very quickly to this topic because obviously it has everything to do with outreach and communication on what we do. And we just have to think about how to take the content that we like and be able to put it out there, to get it ready, to format it, to write it, whatever it is, to post it. And there's a better vehicle than we have now.
If you don't mind, if I just jump in there to
Sure.
add to what Graham and Dennis said. So I can act as the conduit to Kelsey, who's the office clerk, who is actually kind of developing the website in terms of its features and just what it looks like from face value. So what they were looking for, I know, which was the week's end, the last week, was as much as we could give them that would be integrated into the current website, which would then be essentially copied and pasted to move forward. However, I don't think any commission has prepared anything. So they're just probably going to copy and paste and freeze the pages, for those commissions that haven't been developed. So if we just want to piecemeal things, I think it's, as Dennis and Graham said, pictures, calendar of events and outreach that we want to do, and then probably a paragraph or two about just what is HARP. What are we representing? What's the goals we're trying to accomplish? So we can piecemeal that, and I can kind of relay that to Kelsey, piecemeal, and she can kind of add them. I don't think the site's going live for several months, so I can kind of pick on her, when I'm in there during the week and see if she can add things, one at a time.
Yeah, no, that would be great. And I think, just giving her stuff that she can play with. I mean, there was no formal ask, to any of the commissions and committees. As I say, this is very informal, just during that phone call. But I think if we can begin to sort of feed them stuff, it may be able to help them as they're mocking things up and as they're figuring it out.
Do we have, I haven't looked, but a good description of who we are and what we do, just a 1 or 2 paragraph statement? We should consider whether we do, and if not, make sure we craft one.
We've written one, we have one crafted, we have that one pager that we handed out as part of the series, which has, a sort of photograph and has like two paragraphs. So we do have something that we could do with it. I think sort of gives you the big picture, the sort of like the elevator talk thing. So we have that, but so I think that's the kind of thing that, they could get started with.
And certainly a link to the enabling ordinance, which drives us.
Right.
Most people have no idea
No.
at all. I mean, zero, like
Yeah.
what historical architectural review means. Doesn't mean much to most people.
Well, I think most people don't even know that it exists.
Right.
I mean, not just the.
But if it exists, what the hell is it?
Right.
Yeah.
So that's on us to describe it.
And again, I think the more we're out there with the public interface, the better. I mean, that the public interface, it doesn't primarily deal with the regulatory aspect of the work. It's going to deal more with the public education. That's how you begin feeding them information about the regulatory piece as well. So I think that actually is going to work out very, very well.
It's pride we want to communicate.
Yeah, because people don't even, you can tell by some of the threads, some of the social media threads that people really, there's not a broad awareness that we're a functioning thing.
Right.
So, yeah. Okay, so then moving over to the other.
Yeah, and then the other for planning public engagement, message I received makes sense, is that Maggie would like as much as possible for us to develop intended events with some rough budgeting by the end of August, early September, as opposed to doing it ad hoc, asking for money whenever we're having an event. So we can put some thought into that by the end of August, we'll have a better shot of actually receiving funding for some of these events.
So she's in the process of developing a budget herself.
Right, exactly.
Right.
That's great.
And basically, council gets brought into the picture, I think, in November, in terms of like making decisions about budgets. That's why she was saying, early fall would be a great time. And I think, because she knows, I mean, so far, the only money asks we've had have been really sort of small change stuff. There's nothing that's really cost much, and partnered with other organizations, with Kathleen's and with Laura Marion. But anyway, we may have some things coming up that would be bigger ticket. Kevin and I are going back and forth upon what getting the plaque to Minerva is going to likely entail, and there'll be costs
Yeah.
associated with that. So we're trying to begin to get some of those numbers pulled together. Based on, we were talking to Aaron Bentley, who put the Alan Leah plaque together. That's kind of, I think, the most recent one around here that I know of. So she provided some really good guidance about that process and how that works. So that's helping us to develop it. And then, Kevin's had a lot of contact with the state around that. And I guess it's July, we should hear something.
Yeah, July's staff review, and then it goes to the review panel, which is September,
Okay.
or late August.
Okay.
But are you thinking of an award program too? If we do that, there could be some costs related to that, so we have to estimate that.
$200.
That's it?
Yeah.
Okay,
Well, that'd be good. See, then with a lot of this stuff, like especially I'm thinking with the awards program, we may be able to set this up as happening sort of at the same time every year. We might do it as an annual thing, and that's gonna then allow for more longer range planning of things. And so, and that's one of the initiatives I wanted to talk about tonight. Anyway, so, okay. So yeah, just actually maybe sort of relating to that. I mean, I'm seeing that as a thing that we might want to do kind of early in the coming year.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because you figure, so this would go by the borough's fiscal year or so. So I'm kind of seeing the awards things maybe like a spring event that we might sort of pull a specific program together. Where there's some kind of like a talk or a tour component with it, just to kind of give a little sort of, kind of make it a little more interesting around it, not have sort of a simple thing where say maybe, they present something at a council meeting, but rather create an event around it. So,
Okay, you created an event, is there any kind of alternate event happening during time? Spring, roughly?
yeah, I don't know offhand, but I know there's like, I mean, a Civic may have something going on.
Okay.
I mean, our birthday is usually end of April.
That'll be a good time.
But anyway, I kind of think once, springtime when people are kind of out and about again. And also in the meantime, begin sort of thinking about projects that we might want to salute.
Yeah.
Which ones are done when. I mean, I've got, we have one in mind probably that we could launch it with.
Yeah.
And then as other projects are actually carried out. And I can kind of see this thing laying out over the next couple of years, say 3 potentially.
I've made contact with Haas Printing, and they said they can do anything.
Okay.
They're entirely it's up for grabs. It just relies on us to provide some text, some content.
Okay.
So, which led me to believe that I'm kind of stuck in a position. So it's kind of it's good that we're gonna go ahead, but we need the content. So,
Yep. And I think, then figuring out what we want the sort of the event to be like.
Yeah.
So, okay. Okay, good. All right, good. All and then, so in terms of other ideas for investing in tours, because Graham was talking about, we talked about doing tours, Kathleen, we talked about that, so we haven't done the, except for the Minerva Park and Nichols tour. As an addition to the talk. But I mean, that's the kind of thing that would be nice to really try to pull together, and that would be a spring kind of thing as well, so maybe that's all one event. I mean, the thing is too, I mean, I think we have to be sort of strategic in how we plan this stuff, and, I don't want to burn people out with either attending or putting these things together, but I think something happening in the spring and then something else happening in the fall, would be a really good pattern for us. So,
Pattern, as in every year, something in the spring and fall.
yeah,
Did you work any of those tours around Narberth then?
there's no reason why we couldn't, the spring, like our day is a Saturday. We could we could work out a tour that like steps off from the playground along our thing is going on too.
Right,
I know,
so.
I know the bike coalition has done some stuff that way
Okay.
as well, but. I don't know, what do you guys have coming up, or what's your,
My
What's your
spring schedule is of nothing.
Okay. okay,
I know I have some ideas about what we're doing, but we're wide open.
okay. Okay, well, if, there's anything you want to join venture,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We had some ideas about what we would do. I don't think that there's been an Arbor Park walk for a long time, is there?
Norwood?
Narbrook,
Brook. Not for a while.
and there's, gosh, Victoria, there's so much good stuff.
Yeah, and then, because then the Historical Society, we're working on Dick Bickey's book.
Oh, yeah,
So we'd like to have done by the end of the year, at least in terms of editing and photos. So there could be sort of like a springtime.
Yeah.
So then that might make really good sense to tie something in with the book. release. And also there will probably be a completed rehab project in the park.
yeah. The house that's.
16,
Struggling.
the one that, it's,
Yeah.
So, Kevin Flowers.
The other thing is that
Yeah.
we could also get somebody in the.
Why is he shaking his head?
we'll find out, yeah, but, yeah, Kathy.
A general talk about Narberth Park, with maybe a scholar who could talk about David Knickerbocker Boyd and Boyd Naval and
Mhm.
that, because it's Baltimore, Knickerbocker Boyd Naval, and small couple of other architects, but essentially it's the brainchild of Boyd.
And I think the house that's being rehabbed is a Boyd house,
Yeah.
isn't it?
I think it is, yeah. So there are a lot of scholars in the area that I think could talk about Boyd.
Was Boyd the planner of the park as well as the architect of these houses?
Yeah, and he was involved in all over the city, civic. Projects and. City Beautiful, and it was just.
He was really involved with the AIA, I think.
Yeah, he was the
AIA
president
chapter.
or chair of the AIA,
Yeah, yeah,
so,
that would be really, really good.
and there's also, he populated a lot of Narberth with his architecture, it's not just the, Narberth Park,
Right,
so,
he did the bank as well.
yeah, he did so much.
Yeah, in the corner, right in the corner of Northern Avenue and Haverford. It has the dry cleaners on the first floor, that commercial block,
Yes,
that really anchors the downtown, that was, I believe, the Boyd building too.
yeah, Boyd Naval, yeah,
Boyd
and
Naval,
Gugart, I think,
yeah,
There's
and
the
Abel
third
lived in the park too, he was at number 17, number 18. too.
What period are we talking about?
19 teens, Because if the park was laid out in 1914, and the construction was happening, we've grafted building starts in the park, this little burst before World War I, and then immediately after, it really takes also like 1919, 20, 21 is big construction dates in the park. Yeah, we did a thing years ago with Ted and Vicky. And, it's again, one of the things we wish we had taped, but, but anyway, but it was, yeah, so we can kind of return to that, I don't have to talk on that, but we got to pull some folks together for that. That could be, that would be a good event, that's something sort of low hanging fruit, you know?
Very.
It's
Yeah.
also geographically desirable if we're piggybacking off of Narberth Day, which is right there.
Yes, right.
It's easy to walk across the street.
Absolutely. Alright, so that could be like the late April.
Well, whatever Narberth Day is.
Yes, it's usually late April. It's usually not like on Earth Day, but it's usually shortly thereafter.
Wonder, could we,
It is there, yeah.
it may be too much to do, this spring, but we could have the walking tour and then. We could also have a lecture on Boyd and his work in Narberth.
They're not
That would be
one and the
something.
same, you're saying?
No, two different, two
Yeah.
events, but they'd be kind of piggyback.
Related.
And so we would have the scholar, I don't know who that is yet, but I know there's a scholar that could talk about Boyd. And have an evening lecture, and then you follow that with the tour, or we can have the lecture after the tour. It might be a different audience.
But I mean, I can see doing something that ties into like planning communities
Yeah.
too, and that's
Yeah.
sort of part of them.
Well, you know, Greg's studying, Greg Pritchard, you know, I think you all probably know Greg Pritchard. He is actually creating, he's got a big project where he's doing garden. He wants to publish something about the garden suburbs of the Philadelphia area, because there was a book that was published maybe 10 years ago by, oh, big guy out of Yale, it's,
Bob Stern,
yes, his book on garden suburbs, which is like
very
this
big book.
thick. It's beautiful, but I mean, he left Philadelphia out of it. It's,
Yeah,
and
that's
so
obvious.
Greg, yeah, so Greg is kind of trying to make up for that, and so he's, I mean, he can be
That'd be
a
great.
great person to talk about this,
That would be really
and he actually knows Boyd really well,
perfect.
and garden suburbs.
I think his
So,
little ears should be burning. so
Yeah.
I think we're signing it up. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awarded.
yeah,
Right,
yeah,
that's right,
yeah,
yeah. It's Kate. Is that Kate?
Yeah, it's great.
Was that or past
yeah.
president of the Florida Area Historical Society, yeah. All right, no, this is this feels like, well, like a natural, you know?
Mhm.
Great, okay.
May I make a suggestion if we have a good idea here to talk about how to operationalize on this and do some next steps to try to and figure out what to do to make it happen. Whether that's just the next meeting or whatever our next steps are, that we don't just leave it to the next.
Be sure to be in the minutes.
Yeah,
Right. I'm sure.
well, I know Morgan planned to be a great career conversation, we can double team him.
We can.
Yeah. But anyway, but I, yeah.
Well, I mean, a first order of business would definitely be to put costs to some of these events, so we get our requests in, whether or not they're ever recognized.
Good point. So we have.
And overestimate, right,
Honorary,
think of all the costs related to anything we want to do, and then we'll figure out what we actually want to
I
submit.
think we identified several people here who could be tagged to do this. So if that were, say, 3 people times a couple hundred each for honoraria, there's your budget. Right?
It's true.
Unless there's anything else.
No,
Well, that comes out of the borough budget, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's just, that's what we're trying to, that's why we wanna have some cost estimates by November, so we know how much to ask for a township. I mean, they've given us money in the past when we've asked ad hoc, but that's only been like, $150,
Yeah,
for.
So, if we were to say an event would be 3 people times $200 per honoraria.
And give them it for the year, I mean, we basically,
Right,
we're
that's
saying,
one of
they're projecting, okay, what do we want to do next calendar year? Cost wise, and that doesn't mean, and as Maggie was saying, it doesn't mean you can't like change it or.
Right.
Or then do something else, but at least You've got placeholders.
They're placeholders.
Yeah, yeah,
Is there an interest in doing the workshops again?
I think there would be interest.
They were well attended.
Very
Yes,
well.
there were.
I ran into Andrew Stapleton. The Alliance Boards.
Oh, did you? Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Ray is back at work with him at the Conservancy. So, the Vermont Park Conservancy.
Right, right.
He had retired and now they're working together again, so.
Oh, okay,
Yeah.
great, good. No, that was good, and I think they, operating as a tag team the way they were was really good.
Yeah,
And I wish I had understood what that's very good, because I would have put in money for him too, you know what I mean, so.
yeah,
But anyway, but
Okay,
that's the thing you
we-
figured out,
yeah.
sir.
That they did in Mount Area, did a workshop like that this
Yeah.
past year.
yeah.
And they covered roofing and electrical systems, which are new,
Mm,
Moving and
electrical systems.
yeah, that'd be good.
this old house.
Yeah.
Melvin too.
Why not?
I think that's good
Any
for all
views,
like
Bob?
that.
What?
Any of the fuse box.
Yeah, that's right.
That's the way most of these houses work.
Hmm.
Yeah, no, I think that would be good, and then that's the combination, was that, I think both of those would actually be really good topics, and builds on the ones we could, I mean, wouldn't. You could also repeat something that was very popular, because you've got a new audience all the time, I think,
Yeah.
and I think the Windows one was really terrific.
Isn't there no lack of good topics? I mean, unless there is, that's just the obvious one that everybody needs.
Yeah, we felt were the most obvious ones the last time, like interior plaster, points, so masonry, and then windows, and. I mean, each of them was very well attended, we were pulling people from wide geography. too, right?
Yeah.
There was another topic that I think came up as a suggestion. Tell me if you guys remember something about the envelope, something about waterproofing of your entire house and system. Does that ring about people who have wet basements and or just issues with roof and to that?
Well, that's a whole range of
Yeah,
Oh, it is.
topics, really.
Okay.
And wet basements are because we live in a swamp
Hmm,
lined with clay, but we have wet basements.
right.
And
As in there's
the
no.
roofing is a whole different thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true.
You know. Well, I mean, that's where you get into some landscape issues too, grading. Pressure drains, some pumps, But yeah.
But these are mysteries to most people.
Yes. I mean, I think a basement focus would actually be good, I think people would definitely relate to that. So.
This whole basement.
Yeah. And we did them over the course, we did 3 of them over the course of, every other month?
Yeah.
Or every,
Maybe every month.
was it every month?
It was.
During the
It
like
was-
winter,
it was-
spring?
Yeah,
Winter time.
January, February to.
Yeah.
April, I think.
Right. Yeah. So that's it, so maybe we do a fall thing, maybe that would be our fall. That would be this, a series of workshops, if indeed we're gonna do something else in April.
Would you want to partner with the township again on that?
Yeah, that'd be fine, it's something that they really want to.
And do we, the Young Friends or the Preservation Alliance wasn't part of the, were they?
No,
Mm-mm.
It's just
Should
great.
they be?
Well, I mean, it's always good to have, I think that some ways the more the merrier because you bring in people. Not
Young
that we
Friends
need
of
more
the
people.
Preservation Alliance, they have a Young Friends
They
group?
have, the Young Friends are really active, but maybe the general, there you go.
Iron Friends.
I'm already young friends.
But I mean, to Maggie,
Not me.
First time homeowners, they're.
Yeah, that's-
Anybody who wants to be considered a.
Maggie did kind of convey that if we can think of things that require less staffing time for her,
Yeah,
the better. She kind of conveyed that very clearly, which,
There wasn't any staffing requirement last time.
no, so she's
That's true,
preemptively,
yeah.
understand exactly what she's doing, and I would do it, I would have said the
Yeah.
same thing. Were
I
I
can do anything but not with my time. Well,
it takes time, she recognizes that it takes time, but
Right.
we've always kind of done stuff ourselves. you
Yeah.
know, So it's not, we haven't depended upon,
And we have the context, it's not, that's not hard, it's
Right.
like scheduling
yeah,
and getting the funds.
exactly, so, okay. All right, well, we can have some conversations around that and try to see what we might be able to put together, but I think those three topics sound viable, you know. Roofing, electrical systems and basements, but or anything, I mean, I'm not completely wedded to them, but
Could we talk about plug numbers for those as well? So last time around, I think it was the same thing, a couple $100 for the honorarium, right? That was it.
right. Well, it just depends on how many partners you got, you know. We gave them a very minimal honorarium, but, you know.
Just the same thing again, so say, ask for 600 for the spring and for this fall. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah. We'll get those numbers worked out. I mean, that's what we'll be doing over the next couple of months is to really figure it out. And what and when and how much it costs.
All right.
I thought it was good moving it around. I mean, having one here,
Yeah.
One in the township building.
Yeah.
Well, we one here, we one in the Legion. The first was the Legion.
That was a good, that was Win,
That was
Yeah.
was that
Windows.
Windows, that was the one, full house.
What? Okay. All right, good. And then let's kind of keep figuring out the more, what that might look like and what sort of, what kind of an event we might build around it. And then we'll figure out, who we want to give it to. I mean, it's, the new one that, we've had a few nice completed projects and, we'll see what happens between now and then, say next year. So anyway, okay. That sounds good. Anybody else want any other comments on this or topic before we move off of it? No? Okay, so, I guess in terms of, and I don't know, because Carl, you come back and Kathleen, that right?
Yeah.
So, if you know about the conversations that we've had, about the letter the council had written, so. And I guess we're just really sort of talking about that, sort of figuring out, what our way forward, and I think at the meeting, my understanding of the meeting last time is that there's a lot of interest in sort of understanding better the process the first time around, and specifically the work you and Dave did, in terms of figuring things out and actually sort of putting together, the sort of pre-1945 focus that council supported, and then with conversations about, how might that be amended? We've got some guidance from council about one or more buildings that are not currently under our purview that they'd like to see under our purview, and sort of how to make that happen. So, maybe kind of, sort of clue us in a little bit more on sort of how the ordinance first came about, and then, the work that you guys did to sort of make it real.
Well, it was the church, I think it was the Church of the Evangel, that precipitated this movement to create this, to create something. We didn't know at the time, that it was gonna wind up being a historic district. There were lots of ideas that floated around, people had questions about whether they could designate individually, what the designation would look like in terms of regulation. And with the help of Tori Pegrees, who is at the State Historic Preservation Office, we did a lot of outreach to the public to see what it was that the residents of the borough wanted, and the feedback that we got was just that people understood that there was a sense of place in Narberth, and they wanted to maintain that sense of place. We didn't know exactly what that was gonna look like in terms of regulation. This was actually a kind of a pilot program for new way of looking at historic districts at the state level. So
Why? Also,
before Narberth, and I don't think that anything like Narberth has been created since then.
Hmm.
It was it's a black and white, system where you, the municipality adopts guidelines, usually it's the Secretary of the Interior's standards for rehabilitation, and then the more or less using those guidelines to assess changes that would be acceptable to buildings, and so the state gives municipalities the flexibility to decide what they want to regulate, so if you want to say no to vinyl windows, you can say no to vinyl windows. If you want to say no to vinyl siding, you can say no to vinyl siding, but you're all referring back to the Secretary of the Interior standards, which is a list of 11, 10?
10.
10.
Yeah.
but that isn't prescribed in the state law, this.
No.
For your standard.
No, it's
It's not.
municipalities are allowed to do what they want, but most historic districts are created so that changes that are made, minimize as much as possible modifications that would be inappropriate. In this case, though, with Narberth, the sentiment was that people, when it really came down to looking at what wanted, it was maintaining this sense of place, but with a not such a heavy hand with regulation. And so we kind of just landed on what became a demolition ordinance.
Right.
With some other regulation, regulation of character defining, removal of character defining features and so forth. But that was where that was the palatable choice for the public, so.
Has it not been done before, you said, to do?
No, I mean, I don't think to the extent that it was done in Arbor, where we actually had this checklist, right? Where the borough council weighed in on, what's the level of regulation that you want for small details? What are character defining features? And those were the big elements, like a turret, a porch, those,
Like the front door, or,
right, openings.
Yeah. window.
Hmm.
And that, I think we worked on that for a long time.
Yeah.
Do you still have it?
It's all in the document. I mean, it's
In the ordinance?
in the
The
ordinance, right?
checklist is built into it?
Actually, it's a good question.
Yeah, well, that's,
Not in the form of a checklist.
No,
no,
but no, so then the word, it's worked into the ordinance through, wording about what a character defining feature is.
Okay, right. Got it.
And, go ahead, Dennis.
so I was gonna say, what I remember is one of the things that really gave rise to it, like in addition to the church that was going on, was this sort of ramping up of the number of demolitions of houses.
Yeah,
And I think the fear that the community had in that there was no house was gonna be safe because the monetary metric was such that a perfectly reasonable $400,000 house could go down, and then, zoning, our current zoning allowed for a house that you could make them go bottom, you know what I mean? And so with that metric, no little house that could be used as a, quasi starter house was gonna be safe, and we were seeing that. I think advancement, so I mean, that's why it seemed it was very much, the leading edge was an anti-demolition
yeah,
ordinance.
yeah,
Wasn't
right.
this also on the heels of form-based code? And there was kind of a gap perceived that form-based code didn't do enough in terms of preservation or.
That's correct.
Yeah,
That's correct.
Well, zoning doesn't accomplish historically. Tear down any structure that's not protected.
but I guess we were seeing this as something that works hand in hand.
Farm-based code was intended to regulate that which replaced houses that were torn down. So to the extent that we had, under the form-based code, we had some leverage to control what we were going to get and what we were going to get. It was a big step in the right direction. The next step was to basically make it very difficult to tear stuff down in the first place. So it was the
Steps in the process. Moving in that direction.
yeah, it was the left hook.
So before we did that, we made an attempt to understand the character of Narberth, to study what people were saying, what makes Narberth Narberth. So there were various,
Isn't that a challenging thing to do? I mean, you're trying to define a character of a place which is such a soft measure. How do you define it?
I don't think it was difficult in this case,
No.
actually, with Narberth. Because the bulk of the buildings in this borough were constructed between 1885 and 19. They're pre-war, right? And then on the fringes, you have the newer stuff, but what we learned is that there are these traditional patterns of development, all really built around the train. This grid pattern, houses that had front porches, houses that had detached garages, houses on streets that had very similar setbacks, and so the rhythm of these, so there were distinct neighborhoods. We know that the south side has some distinct neighborhoods, and the north side, and of course we talked about Narberth Park, but there were some great similarities that united a lot of these neighborhoods. There was also a talk, I think, about, do we create smaller historic districts? Do we create a south side historic district and a north side? Yeah, I think we just came back to the understanding, the feeling that the entire borough sort of met the criteria. And it would be better for us to do a borough-wide district.
It's such a small place.
Yeah.
It looks, look how different from Lower Marion it is, where you're kind of locked into having to look at more traditional districts because of the size of it. But this seemed a lot more manageable, I guess.
Yeah,
And actually, that was kind of the way back in the early '90s. That was when the state came and looked at it then, that was the advice we got from them at the time.
1991.
91, yeah. So, it kind of sort of makes sense.
and so we chose a period of significance, which we later learned was not necessary for the ordinance.
Right, but I guess you're working on a traditional construct. And
Why
I
did you
think,
say it wasn't necessary?
well, maybe I'll say that's before we go on, that's because when you were working with the state, in terms of periods of significance, you ran two of them by them. And so one was the pre-1945, and then one would have taken it up to say 1970. And my remembering was that the state was fine with either one, and that I guess the council could wrap their arms around the 1945 date
Yeah.
easier, is how that came about. But I didn't know sort of how that all played out, because I know that there was a rationale for each of them that you guys had put together, I thought.
Yeah, I think, and you were part of this, so you're right. With deciding what the cutoff was, but we were working with this model, sort of historic district model.
Right.
National Register kind of model where we were choosing this period of significance.
Right.
But for local municipalities, the Historic Preservation Act, it really allows the municipality freedom to kind of define what the character is. And then anything that sort of that aligns with that character, fits into the definition of that character, can be included as a contributing resource.
Mhm.
So that the dates are, I think they're important, so because they help us to understand what that character is,
Yeah,
but we don't actually have to have that,
and indeed,
That
the date is enshrined on the map.
yes.
It's not memorialized in the ordinance
Oh,
itself,
mhm,
which we didn't realize for a very long time,
mhm.
you know? And so there, to me, there was an inconsistency there.
So are you saying then that the map zigs in and out? I didn't know that. You're not saying
So
that.
saying that the map says pre-1945, but the ordinance itself
The
does not.
map has language that says pre-1945 in this map,
Yes,
but it doesn't say it in the ordinance?
right,
Oversight, I would say. Maybe.
So that
Maybe.
that is an interesting oversight, because then, I mean, if somebody wanted to get technical on it, if somebody really wanted to challenge it, I mean, there's a hole there,
Yeah,
right?
Not
and
the
at the
size
very
of a,
least,
not the size of a Mack truck, I would
yeah, you
say.
could drive a large vehicle, but
Yeah.
at the very least, it makes it difficult for us as a body to be able to explain to the public, what we're doing, because you want to be able to explain why you're doing what you're doing, how you define things, and that's the beauty of sort of like traditionalist ordinance, because it's pretty clear, clear cut. This was a little, little softer.
And that we used, when we made that determination about what did we say, it was 1880 to 1945, or no, it goes way back.
It's
It goes all the way to the
early.
1700s, right?
Yeah.
We kept coming back to what is the character? And that's actually written into the heritage plan. Remember that there was this plan that preceded the
Yes,
historic district. So the ordinance was actually created, based on our findings that are in the heritage plan, which says, sort of, this is the character of Narberth. It goes up to 1945 for these reasons, because this was a railroad-centered suburb. These are the features that we want to preserve. And so, sort of lifting from that, that's how we get the 1945 date. So
Right.
anything that's outside of 1945, it's not necessarily, doesn't necessarily disqualify it, but it doesn't meet the definition, I think, of what is the character of Narberth.
Yeah.
So it may be a question that we need to have with the state about redefining, if you wanted to bring the period of significance, or you
Yeah.
wanted to
be
create,
able to protect
Add
buildings
more,
that are
right?
currently by right protected.
yeah.
yeah.
But my conversation with Megan McNish, I left with the feeling that the borough really has the discretion here. The borough has
Yeah,
a lot of power to make those determinations, as long as the ordinance is consistent with the comprehensive plan and what the comprehensive plan says about historic preservation, or what it says about the character of the borough. And I think that in the zoning that's written into, right, preserving that character, so that's important.
So they're both comprehensive, because the thing is that, the explanation, the discussion of, sort of the rationale, none of that made it in the ordinance either. So, I keep looking for what's the verbiage that we could hang our hat on, and sort of be able to explain to people how this was done and why. So, I mean, it ties into the comprehensive plan, then that's something, but that's not a linkage that people necessarily know
Yeah.
exists.
I think I think it would be helpful to include somebody from the state organization.
she'll be here next month. Yeah, Megan will be here, so
Yeah.
you should be planning to ask her all of these questions. Just to go back to the heritage plan, because I think that preceded me and I've never seen it.
So
So that was to whom was that submitted?
that was submitted first to the planning commission, and then the borough council eventually made a recommendation to sort of adopt this heritage plan.
This was done, I assume, by a third party, some consultant had done it on
I
that. You did.
I did it, Corey and I did it, well, actually, it was more than, it was a group effort, it was the Conservancy, it was the state, I think that, Chloe Moore
Oh, yeah, 'cause I
is
remember
the
Chloe working.
county planner,
Yeah.
she was involved with it. Yep. We were
Because
determining
Chloe
boundaries.
had developed a whole like list of
Yes.
how housing developed and when.
Mhm.
And that was making me think that the 1970s was making sense because she was able to really demonstrate a lot of activity in the 1950s and 60s, you know, akin with the development in the 20s and 30s, you know what I mean? So,
Yeah,
but I remember she had worked on that. And I should ask her for that, because I haven't.
I have it,
Do you have a?
oh, yeah,
Or-
and maybe that would be good to have
Yeah.
on the website also.
It'll be good to review it, just because whenever we actually get to a point where we're making a decision. I think we all need to be working off of the exact same documents,
Right.
especially if this process preceded the existence of the HARB
Sure.
or the involvement of the members, because. It's just not good policy, I think, to have like, well, we did this back then. Basically, if it's not in a document, it didn't exist in terms of our decision-making process. As far as I'm concerned, because, and also think in the future, just to have it would be helpful, should we ever develop something like design guidelines, because you've done a lot of the work already. So we can just have that on record.
Yeah,
That's my, I mean, it's exciting to hear that it exists.
Mhm.
And certainly, Dennis, I'm hearing what you're saying about developing a rationale that refers to documents that are either like adopted or at least informally accepted.
you need to be able to show people.
Yeah.
Things, you know, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, well, and also too, I mean, now that we've been kind of in operation for about 3 years. And we've seen, they see how successful it's been, you know, at limiting demolition, really in terms of residential demolition, there hasn't been any since. But then you get to see, okay, so where does the rubber meet the road? And so what we've seen is like, you know, additions are the thing, so they can't tear down a house by right, and you're trying to add to it. So that's been the sort of thing we've had to really navigate is scale.
Mhm.
Scale of additions, placement of additions. And, you know, that's where we've kind of like brought the secretary standards in because it talks about that a little bit. And then looking at sort of basically stealing other people's design guidelines, you know, look at Lower
Yeah.
Merions and
Mhm.
other ones that at least give some guidance and visuals
Mhm.
for how people should think about placement and scale.
Mhm.
And scale's the big issue.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's half the battle right there.
Yeah.
But if one were to ask us to change a period of significance to be inclusive of other properties, there is actually nothing preventing us from doing that.
Yes, it's my understanding. And Megan can give us more guidance on that.
Right. But maybe as opposed to that, we should be thinking of what would enable us
Mhm.
to rationalize including
Yeah.
something in general.
Yeah.
Okay. What were the largest conflicts related to the creation of the historic district? In terms of, what constituted the sense of place?
Good question. I think that it's difficult for people to put their finger on what constitutes a sense of place. Certainly Main Street, that having Avenue in the business district, that was a big one. That was a challenge, and I'm sure that you're still challenged by it. I don't know where that big development is right now, but.
Well, we're challenged by the proposed replacement level, which fails to create a sense of place.
Right. And that's difficult,
Fails big time.
yeah.
I
It's hard. and-
underscore big time, say it in a louder voice maybe, big time. The randomness and the obvious history that is represented by that ragtag collection of storefronts is charming. And we all love it. in each in our own strange way, but you can't recreate that with CAD,
Right,
turns out. And
yeah,
that's what the part of design demonstrates.
yeah, that was a big one, garages, I think,
Okay,
pushback about garages. Like what it makes,
Can you give us some thoughts on what, or tell us what the thinking was back then, or was there some discussion or debate around garages and inclusion or not?
yes, I think that there was debate about whether garages should be included at all, and then. There was some compromise with the layers,
Yeah,
right.
but,
The lot layer was the answer to that debate.
I think. Kind of like,
well, I guess it brought it into a vocabulary that they were used to talking about because of planning. Because, I mean, in preservation, we don't talk about lot layers, we
Right.
talk about visibility from a public right of way. But the lot layer was another kind of layer,
Right.
you know, added on to it, that's made it.
So how did that work? I guess when you talk about lot layers, Kevin, it essentially says that we're not regulating garages, correct? Because it's not in that lot layer.
Only if it's not in the lot.
Yeah, it depends. I mean, Kathleen, when you guys went through, I remember that you would specifically ask me questions about garages on corner properties to make sure that they were quote unquote like within the first lot layer. And actually change, yeah. So, corner properties technically have two first lot layers. So, like if it was kind of seen right away from either corner, they wanted to preserve those in that aspect. And then there was also like the text from our historic ordinance that says we only have purview over the first and second ordinance. So there were some that even though they were visible from the street on the corner property, technically they were in the third lot layer from a zoning perspective. And it was like even if you wanted to, identify them as a historic resource, we wouldn't be able to have any purview or control over them. So I think you did a really good job on identifying specifically garages throughout the borough and make sure they matched up with the district and the zoning definitions.
yeah, I do remember doing that, that also might be worth a conversation also in terms of best practices, because this, Margaret is a certified local government, right? You're a CLG here?
I don't, are we, Kevin? I don't think we are.
I couldn't hear Kathleen. I'm sorry, I couldn't
Oh,
hear
I'm
you.
sorry, Kevin, are we a CLG, here, a certified local government?
I'm not the right person to ask. Sorry.
That's something that the state confers on a municipality, and you have to meet certain standards, and show that you're doing stuff by the book, and that you've created a comprehensive plan. Whatever, every 10 years, not that they don't hold it against you, I don't think that's a plus if you have, but we have a preservation plan in terms of the heritage plan that's Borough Council, did make recommendations.
So what's the
approved.
significance of that?
So you can get, the borough then becomes eligible for funding for things like, events,
Mhm.
workshops to plan, if you wanted to get, grant funding to create, an inventory of everything that you have, survey, things that they fund through their preservation grant, program, you have to be a certified local government. I don't know what it takes to get one. I
I
don't know
wouldn't
the
know if we were
applications.
certified.
I think the state.
Anybody
I'm gonna guess we're not.
I actually did a Google search and it says yes that that we are. I mean, I'm not sure.
Oh.
There's actually a link to it. So
Okay, interesting.
I don't know where we were about that. Oh, but so does,
The
does,
garages,
to the garages, is that a best practice for a historic district? Because I think that there was some, maybe not disagreement, because, the state, as I said, they give the municipality a lot of flexibility, but I think they do have a preference in terms of how they approach these things, and I think that lot line thing is new for the state.
Mhm.
for what it's worth, the inventory that Kevin, you sent us had identified every structure, including every garage that was all in the inventory. So in my photographing these properties, had to distinguish between them and weed out the primary structure from the garages. I mean, just for the purpose of taking photos. So it's actually in there. The inventory includes it.
Yes, right, and the map, I think, does also,
Hmm.
they're color coded or. But the other challenges, I think we talked about integrity a lot. What constituted a building that had integrity?
Right, and that particularly comes up with, I think, some of the buildings we were asked to look at, the ones along Montgomery Avenue. That had been changed, that had like additions out front. We have a whole row of them, and some of them are still that building, that twin, and the one next door. So in terms of like, you know, how you deal with those and.
How do you define integrity? Does that mean original
Well,
or original intent? As
I
in
think
similar?
changes that are occurred when during the period of
Yeah.
significance.
Yeah,
If a change that occurred after 1945 that modified a building to the extent that it wasn't, you know,
That's-
recognizable as itself anymore. But if you had a storefront that was appended to a Victorian building, that would be something that had integrity because that occurred during that period when Narberth developed its character.
right, because, yeah, it allows change to occur, it doesn't freeze it, you know, it doesn't say it's, you know, you're working with this purity of the original building. But it's saying that there are changes that are significant over time because they represent different patterns of use, or, you know, in this case.
Yeah.
You know, whereas residential buildings are now having to function commercially as well, you know, where it's, you know,
Mhm.
so. And that's part of the story of the boroughs.
I remember an example of this, the conversation was in the Main Street world where there were facades that were improved with materials of a different period, and this was the black glass-like panels, I don't remember the name of them, that were put onto facades that dramatically changed them, but then were accepted as part of the period in which they were applied, which is now historic.
Right, there's a design.
Separate, but
to that.
yeah,
Well, we've got to take an example on Haverford Avenue, the Asian restaurant that has that curved glass. Storefront, right, the Thai restaurant. That has a curve, that was later, you know, it was a 1920s building, that then got this kind of 1950 curved glass, and really nicely detailed and designed, so that would be a good example of one where, you know, it's a very different storefront, but that there was a design aesthetic of its time as well, that gives it equality. You know, so.
so that again is defined by the period of time. Is that correct? I mean, as you were saying, it was modified during a certain period of time. That qualifies it.
In terms of evaluating integrity.
Yeah,
Jim's Steaks on South Street comes to mind.
there you go.
Sure.
Speaking of black glass,
That's the one. That type. Yeah, right.
and it's very distinctive and it is representative of its time.
It's not a
It was slapped onto a road building that undoubtedly worked. Strict.
I kind of relate, we've previously discussed reversibility as a criterion for
Hmm.
integrity, but to go back to what you were saying about garages. I mean, I'm thinking in terms of our process, we're never, I don't expect we'll ever have the chance to do the deep dive that Kathleen and this team did. So I'm of the belief that when in doubt, defer to kind of their work and their process. So if someone were to ask us hypothetically to reconsider garages, but nothing has changed and they don't provide any reason to change, I will just stick with the decision on the books, which is to include garages. That's my thinking, or at least that's a lower priority in the list of priorities for our review because nothing has changed. And they've already spent all this time reviewing this. us in previous.
Yeah.
It
Well,
says
also,
something
too,
about
I
it.
think you're having to, there's an educational component of this thing, because we're working with, you know, for a lot of people, garages are just write-offs. You know, they don't see them as being, you know, critically important buildings that tie in with the development patterns of build of houses at a particular time period, you know. So, I mean, some of it is trying to explain to people why uh, garages are worth more than the nothing that
Mhm.
people assume that they are. You know, they are designed, you know, they're specifically accommodating the new way of life and an automobile and, you know, residents have made a whole host of ways in which the automobile has been provided for. And, I was kind of surprised to see them come up as an issue, because they really haven't been that much in our review. But you
I
know,
think there have been examples where somebody sought to demolish the garage to fit more house. And that's come up in the past year, right?
I
I think
guess so.
there was a case where there was a skinny little house and we were looking at, and it I think pretty much took out that garage and even if I'm just making this stuff up, I don't think I am, it could and would happen.
Mhm.
And I'm not sure I understand our reg now. I think I heard Kevin say we don't include it. It's not in the third lot layer, so it's not under our purview. Is that accurate or not?
For the most part, I'm actually skimming through and trying to find out how many total garages are actually under our purview. I'm counting on maybe one hand or two hands in the entire borough.
Yeah, the ones that are in the first or second lot layer.
Yeah,
Yeah, as defined in that Excel sheet. Yeah, I'm kind of actually trying to sort that now.
Right.
And
which is kind of a technical view.
Well, it's very atypical. Here's an example of how this ordinance differs from ordinances that came before it, at least in Pennsylvania. Resources on the property that date to that period and retain their integrity, are normally all included.
Yeah.
So a garage in any other district would be a contributing resource.
And in our case, there was a decision not to do that because of this limit of the lot layer.
I think it sounds like I wasn't there, but it's in part a proxy for visibility from the street. And
Yes,
in part,
Yes.
not having the heavy hand.
I was there, and that's exactly.
Yeah.
There used to be an ordinance in Norwich back in the days of Pocahontas. When an accessory building, a garage had to be 10 feet, I think the number was 10 feet beyond the rearmost plane of the primary building, the residence. And that had some,
It had to be beyond 10 feet.
yeah,
Okay.
so that, in some way, that was meant to facilitate fire access to the rear of a house. Right? Kind of a simplistic way of thinking about fire access, but that was the intention, it was well intended. So that pushed garages hard up against the rear property line generally, which served a number of purposes, actually. Not just fire safety.
And actually, I guess a lot of the garages couldn't be built today because they are sitting hard on the property line.
That's right. Mine is one.
And today would require some setback
Yeah, well,
Off the rear, I think it's only about 3 feet though.
3 feet, that was designed, that was to allow a garage owner to at least get a step ladder up on his own property to maintain his own garage.
That's for an accessory building, like a habitable building, I think is more like 6 feet.
Yeah,
Right, yeah.
so where's that leave us?
Well, I mean, we have a letter with a lot of things to respond to, and you've had a look at it. So, I'm trying to think of in going through it, I mean, I think ultimately we could make a point by point response. So I mean, in a few cases, there are buildings that were left off or just omitted, by accident, or, is that the one of the sort of Queen Anne style ones on Windsor Avenue, I mean, there are a few of those.
I think those are the easy ones.
Those are the ones, because they were clearly omissions. The things that get a little bit more sort of dicey in terms of justifying or explaining, I'm thinking, are those ones on like Montgomery Avenue? Some are pretty easy to explain, I mean, they're discussed, I mean, I think that the collision center and some of the buildings on the sort of over close to Montgomery Avenue, but not right on Montgomery Avenue. I think in some cases, borough council has taken sort of a really literal thing. We are a borough of little brick houses. We are, so, and so something that doesn't look like a row house over there seems like it doesn't fit. But it fits because of the use, because of the sort of quasi-industrial nature of that is historically. So, I mean, part of the, but I mean, that's the kind of stuff I think we're gonna need to be sort of explaining the rationale for.
In a sense, so you considered multiple districts in part as a way to recognize the diversity within Narberth's sense of place. Would that be fair?
We did,
And
yeah,
that was, I mean, I'm sure that was part of the discussion.
yes,
That is present in a certain document, but was not carried through.
I think that might be in the heritage plan,
Okay.
Cory did a really good job of laying out the process. Because there's the piece of the heritage plan that, talks about the history and the character, but then there's also a piece of the heritage plan that explains the process, starting from the first conversation about this, in public, and then carries through to
Okay.
conversations that we had about outreach, and then the outreach itself, and then all of the times that this came before the planning commission, I think, and then eventually the borough council. So that's in that document.
Okay, all right, well, that's the next thing to really match up.
Yeah.
Good, all right, excellent. All right. Well, this has been helpful.
Yeah, it has been, thank you.
Really, very good. I mean, I was around, but I was going kind of tangentially involved.
Okay.
You were more so because you were on the planning commission at the time
Yeah, but I had nothing to do with
with this.
this was you and Dave.
Yes.
This was,
You and Dave, Corey,
Yeah,
and
different.
Chloe.
and I don't know where he is tonight.
Okay.
He said he would be here, but
Okay.
This heritage report was done when? How long ago do you think?
Well, so the ordinance is 3 years old now, is that what you're saying? It
Yeah,
started in probably 3 years before, so at least 6
Maybe
years.
like 2018.
More recent than I assume. Okay.
Yeah. I'm gonna say like 17, 18.
Yeah.
Probably.
I'll send you. I'll send this group the PDF.
Great, okay. So that'd be good.
It's not on our website. I mean, there's yet another document that we could use as a reference in the new website, right? Link to that as well as the ordinance if it's a foundation.
it should all be there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I know, and I'm trying to, when you were helping me to piece together these documents that were not, didn't seem to exist other places, and that helped me to kind of understand. it
Right,
a
right,
little way
yes,
better.
yeah,
Gosh, didn't know it existed.
And the thing, and having Chloe's chart, having her sort of breakdown, I think is gonna be helpful too.
I think Maggie was also, she was involved in it before Chloe.
Yeah,
Maggie started. the
that was,
project, I
yeah,
think.
But she now will deny any.
exactly.
I would too.
What's that little tool in Men in Black? Didn't they go up to her with that little thing and like erase her memory?
Paralyzer.
Yeah, yes, very.
She'd have to do that to all of us then.
Oh, but I would love it.
It's happened to me, but through more natural processing.
Yeah.
Me too.
Okay.
Okay, Kevin Walsh, any reports or anything we should be on the lookout for coming down the road?
Not really. I didn't want to kind of overwhelm you all with interrupting kind of throughout the meeting, but I do have notes. So just bear with me here. I put pipeline projects. Super exciting. We may have a front porch reconstruction on a twin. That's like the thing that I think is most possible to come to us, and that's probably going to be an advisory review, is my guess. So that's the extent of what we have coming down the pipe. A note I made about the website, I said make sure we make an impression. The reason I wrote that is because so many people come in to me during consultations and zoning kind of ideas where they've worked through all the zoning and they haven't even thought about historic, which to me is actually the first step. It's almost like, can you even do it from a historic standpoint? And then can you do it from zoning? So I think the website's a good opportunity for us to make an impression and make sure we get as much information in a concise manner out there, whether it's pictures or legislation or examples. So that was my second note.
How do you handle that situation, Kevin?
Well, hopefully they don't have like a zoning plan. I mean, we've had people come in and actually, Dennis, we had an advisory review where somebody had full construction and architectural drawings.
Yeah.
The harm existed, and we're like, well, you wasted $4,000 getting these, blueprints drawn up. Luckily, that's somebody that's a frequent flyer that has learned from that mistake. But I think the website is just going to be a good opportunity, being more user friendly for all of the commissions to kind of be better understood. Whether it's the calendar and what we're offering, or whether it's kind of just the general idea of what each commission represents. So I think we need to focus on that in kind of the short term. I put speaking to earlier discussions, and this is going back to the meeting that we had via Zoom last week. Maggie suggested mirroring ideas that were successful in the township or locally. It's an easier sell to council in terms of budgeting. If it's something that has been successful, it's easier for the borough to kind of agree to put money in the budget for an activity or presentation or anything else that we think that has been done successfully before that'll help the cause for the harb in general. And then kind of secondhand to that is try and partner for the obvious reasons of both staffing and financial. If we can split the cost with somebody else, whether it be the township or anyone else, whether it's volunteers and just general internal borough staffing. That was kind of a point that I'd take out of our meeting last week.
Yeah.
So those were kind of the points. I know they were kind of all over the place, but that's what I'd written down. But I think the website's the most important thing. I think coming down the pipeline, we don't really have a ton. And then I think partnering and using past experiences for what we're looking for budget wise come August, September is
Right.
something we need to keep an eye on.
Great. Because I mean, actually, functionally, I guess you've always been our first line of defense. You're the one that, they come to you and you clue them in about preservation and about the harm being, coming to this. And so, I mean, I still see you as we'll be doing that, but you're gonna be able to at least point them to a website that has a lot of information for them. Because I mean, I don't know how many people actually look at the website before they come and talk to you, although, as you said, you have a number of frequent flyers who are much more aware now, but.
I just think in Narberth, zoning is just a more common practice just in general for construction and development, whereas, the historic district is more of a new idea in the borough. And they're really, not only is there not a website, it's just, you have to digest that entire ordinance and what it means to you. So you really need an understanding of zoning to even know where to start.
Yeah, right. Gotcha. Well, I mean, I think in terms of the other things you mentioned, in terms of successful elsewhere, in terms of workshops, we can point to the series that we did 2 years ago, both as content and also because of the sort of partnering with other organizations and the sharing of resources and stuff. So we'll make sure that we actually lean into that when it comes time.
And the results in attendance.
Yeah, because we were having like 70 people, plus to come to these things. So, okay, great.
Something that I just kind of connected the dots on with the website and our message And Kathleen, what you had said about the reason for the ordinance in the first place, the call to action was the threat of demolition of the church, which did get demolished. That was the thing that pulled people together and really defined the need for what we're doing here. And I'm thinking out loud that there's probably a story to be told around the elimination, the end of this trend of demolition. That we've effectively stopped it. And if we were to look back over the past couple of years, and I don't know how hard it would be to find out roughly even how many properties were demolished over the past 5 years prior to the ordinance compared to now, a lot, which is zero. And maybe even a photo of the demolition of that beautiful historic building is pretty compelling. I mean, that is the bottom line here that we've effectively achieved. That's also a pretty strong story of something important that happened, that we've effectively stopped the demolition of all of these properties. We've gone from that horrific thing with that historic, beautiful building being knocked down to now zero demolitions. That's something worth noting and celebrating. I think that's a pretty compelling story to tell.
I agree.
We
have
can
to get
lead
through
with
the,
that.
to
Huh?
get through the downtown situation, see if, whether, if that.
Well, that's a whole nother thing.
I know, but it's gonna be, that's
where the
it's a big,
stressor
it's
is.
a
That's
biggie.
the stressor.
It's a
I have
stressor,
I have
absolutely, but it's, I mean, you're going to the pain, I'm going to
I know.
the celebration.
Hooray.
Yeah.
I have a suggestion, actually, for the folks here, but maybe for Kathleen, if we can we find a private partner perhaps to, if you hold workshops, maybe partner with the, one of the magazines on the main line or something, but put together a contractor directory advertisement piece. If you want to look at, if you're talking about wet basements, if you're talking, well, all of these things, window restoration, right, essentially, contractors with references would be helpful to be property owners.
Well, I mean, some people are more free to do that than others. I mean, government entities are pretty,
That's why I said
Yeah.
you could look for a private, and they could actually potentially pay to have this printed, and you could distribute it to the attendees.
but it can't be specific action that we're taking.
I
Okay,
did,
all right,
again, for the third time, yes, we would
Oh,
find a
okay.
private partner.
come out.
But it's just like, if everyone's assembling, that's an opportunity to operationalize,
Mhm.
you know what I'm saying, like, as opposed to, as someone who went to some of those workshops several years ago, it was like, great, like, I love my wood windows and I've been indoctrinated, save my wood windows, right? But, you gotta find someone to do it. I know Kathleen's like, well, I just did all my own, but it's
No, I
like,
understand. No, it is not actually something that the conservative League has had on the list of things to do for many, many, many years. And so I think that we can do something like the Preservation Alliance has done on their website. They don't make recommendations, but it's kind of, you might know the language better than I do. These are people who
Mhm.
have done work in the preservation area and
Are they
we
not
know,
paying to be listed
No.
or not?
no, they're not, no. But
It's
they've
not
been
a
sort of
directory
vetted
of
by
vendors.
people who,
No,
the Preservation Alliance is not gonna be putting, the $100 vinyl window distributor on there. But they're not vouching for these companies, they're just
Exactly.
saying,
yeah.
So
Here's
maybe we
some-
link to that.
Yeah, because I remember like when I was with the feds, we would, I had a list of say 10, people who would seem to qualify. So you're not interested, like, but you're giving them something that's helpful.
Yeah.
But it is a tough, we really have to kind of walk that as a government agency. With sort of current federal government notwithstanding, we know that seems to be a problem, but anyway, we're always very much aware of
Yeah.
what our role was.
And Lower Marion also does not make recommendations about contractors, they're very
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
explicit about that.
To your point, there are ways, once you gather a group of people together, to invite folks to share good experiences and names are referred to without us distributing anything.
Right.
You know, so it's kind of like. I'm trying to take your point, which is people do want that information. I'm also trying to take your point is we might not be the ones to give them that information, but we can set the table in ways. Yeah, and
Because
then,
we recognize it's a minefield.
yeah, exactly.
For people trying to get work done.
Yeah,
I do have a pretty significant list of people who do work in the historic building trades. But I can always use more names, so if any of you have names of people in any of the top, 10 needs. Please
Yeah.
forward those to me.
Well, do you distribute them at request? Because you could be the person.
Yeah, no, I'd like to create this list or do something to have a menu on our site for people. I've gotten a lot of questions about windows lately.
We could link to that off of our page, could we not? If it's their recommendation and not ours.
Or you could link to the Preservation Alliance also. I don't know how often they update theirs.
And I think it's just, to me, it's similar to the role that chambers of commerce and so on can play, but I mean, think about how the tourism agencies or tourism organizations support tourism, right? With, here are all the sites you can see, here are all the hotels you can stay at, the restaurants you can, places you can shop, like, it's just a directory essentially. And there are many places that help, that contractors essentially have a magazine that adds contractors, right? Focused on selling the things that you buy for domestic architecture, but like this is a sort of a niche area, right? Well, I'm looking, I want to do this thing, but how do I go about finding
Yeah.
the parts I need or the person I need to help me with it, right? So it's just about if you're going to convene them, the public, one of the people that could come to that is the people that provide services or products.
So you have a renovation fair. Go.
Maybe, kind of, yeah.
That's actually a really good idea.
I mean, there probably is nothing stopping us from saying, if you want to find an architect with experience on historic properties, there is an AIA historic preservation group that can refer you to someone. And I think I would be comfortable with doing something like that because we're not actually we're directing.
Do you
It
have
could be a
anything
complication.
like that?
Oh, you don't? Oh, okay. Well, Partners has a national one, but it's for religious architect. People contact us all the time. However, some of these people do pay to be in our magazine. And then we add people.
Well, there's no shortage of,
So,
well, I'm
yeah.
not sure. There is a shortage of
There's a shortage.
preservation, craftspeople, and it's only getting worse.
Yeah, let me ask you, let's say I've got special tuck pointing, right? I've got my ribbon masonry, but I gotta repair the masonry, right? With it, like, how do I find the
Yeah.
mason?
Right. We can do that. We can do that. And the conservancy.
So roofing's a good example too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that I don't know if the fair makes sense, but it is an interesting idea, right? To say like, well, these are all the things that, like, congratulations, you have an historic home, right? You have pointing, you have windows, you have all, like, you could.
I like
live in
the
historic district and we're watching.
I wish.
I mean, so one thing why
There's
PA
guys
did,
on your tuck pointing.
was
wish.
we invited a group of 5 new homeowners of historic property owners in Philadelphia. And they were on a Zoom call and they talked about their lessons learned, right? And so you just get a group of property owners together and they say, yeah, I bought this house in Roxborough and the roofer I contracted screwed me over. I'll never work with that person again. And we didn't tee them up, but they shared that information and said, I worked with this person who's great, and then that was one of our most popular events recently. And then the names got around. So, I mean,
I know it's
Yeah.
not, I know it's not the district even, but like because we'll, all talking about conservation of the exteriors, but I know, the interiors get modernized, but a big example of upcoming Question would be things like, well, do I keep hydronic heating or
Mhm.
not? And these, you know, I suspect you're gonna have a whole generation of people who don't really have a lot of experience.
Well, I think I do actually like this fair idea, and that would take some planning, but
Yeah, it's,
if we coordinated it with the borough and the township and the conservancy and maybe the alliance,
could be done,
I think it
We
would
could
really,
actually, the Long Island Historical would be all participants, so,
yeah,
right?
yeah. Yeah.
fair.
We just have to vet,
Like
we
the,
I
all
said-
know people who do this kind of
I
work.
sent somebody your way, by the way, I don't know if they've contacted you yet, but. I'll tell
We'll talk
you.
about it then.
So, okay, good, I think we are set then for now. Anything else, any other new business before we adjourn?
Oh, I've got one.
Yep.
On Iona and Meeting House, I saw a project that was starting. You know it, Kevin? Iona and Meeting House?
Yeah, 31 or
Yeah.
31, one of those two.
They're doing a large addition to the rear of the house. And it probably falls under the third lot layer issue. But it's a quarter lot. And the addition will be fully viewable.
Yeah, and believe it or not, they're actually converting that detached garage, which is kind of way away, not way away from the lot, but relatively speaking, kind of off the lot and more towards the back of Meeting House. They're actually converting that detached garage into an accessory dwelling unit, which will be our first one that's going through the pipeline. So they have their permits. I know a lot of people are worried about it. And actually the overdig on that site is making that addition look way, way bigger than it is. So it's
Yeah.
actually just a smaller 2-story addition and a covered porch, but the foundation for the covered porch is pretty substantial, which is making it look bigger than it is.
But that is the one that needed to come to us for comment.
They didn't.
Accessory dwelling, so it's a garage apartment? Is that the-
Yeah, so we adopted that maybe 2.5 years ago. There's like square footage requirements. What they have to do for kind of getting the weeds here, what they have to do to be compliant with their zoning code is that accessory dwelling unit kind of on paper architecturally needs to represent itself as a primary structure, if that makes sense. So like there needs to be some sort of building frontage. So like they're gonna put on like a projecting porch to it that faces Meeting House Lane. It's almost like a mini house. So they're doing that, but the addition looks huge. I've had a few people reach out to me. It's really not as big as it seems, and it actually falls like 2 feet into the third lot layer. Just the way the existing building works. So unfortunately, it didn't have to go to us.
Something on the previous topic, the main topic was the photos that I took and I sent around and I sent them late, so I don't know who received them. And so I have these printed out, just two, but I ended up, putting them into a single document and putting the addresses on them. And we didn't get into it tonight on the matter, the big issue of in or not in. But I think this is pretty instructive to be able to take a look at these. This is, I think, a representative example with the exception of those on Montgomery Avenue, which were previously documented.
looks like a rogues gallery to me,
Well, this is a
not that
whole,
I formed a snap decision.
this is a whole big topic.
Yep,
And I thought this can be food for thought.
yep,
And obviously, there's not time in this meeting, but when we convene next, we can look at this and have it in focus and context.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for doing that. Yeah, definitely, yeah, with some time to like look at it, it'd be great.
And if anybody wants to add to this, I think I sorted the list. And I sifted out those that were garages. And then went through the list and photographed maybe a third of them. So if anybody wants to pick up on this and make this a comprehensive study, you're welcome to do that. I don't know if it matters. This is a good handful, but it gives us a good sense of the question of character that we're talking about.
Yep, it does.
Yes.
Great. Okay, now a motion to adjourn.
I some,
I say.
Okay, we are adjourned. Great, thank you, guys.
thanks for coming, Kathleen.
Yeah.
You're welcome, I sent the group the heritage plan and